We're very fortunate. I have a really great relationship with my wife, and we're very happy. We had a daughter who was the perfect baby. We decided to have a second child pretty quickly, so they would grow up together. We were living in the States just before Thomas was born, and an old woman said to me one day, as I opened the door for her, she said, "God bless you." And as she walked through, I thought, if there is a God, he's already blessed me. Yeah, and then he was diagnosed when he was 6 months old. So Thomas was born in November 2006. He was a bit difficult to feed. By about January, he was starting to refuse to eat, and by February, just stopped eating altogether. So they did pretty much every test you can imagine. They did a blood test, a wee test, a poo test, a sweat test, and then finally an MRI scan of his head. I was at my desk at work, and the paediatrician rang me and said, "Chris, we found a growth." And he said, "You need to come into the hospital, bring your wife, we need to talk about options for treatment." And then he said, "This will be the worst phone call of your life." We hung up, and then I had to ring my wife and tell her, and I realised that he was wrong. That, telling Sam that our 6-month-old baby had a brain tumour, that's the worst phone call of my life. So he had craniosurgery. They operated sort of from here, cut him open right across the top, and then 16 months of chemotherapy. I think at one stage he'd had about 38 MRIs, 35 of which required a general anaesthetic. At the end of that, it seemed like everything was okay, and grew up, started school, and then when he was 6, just about the time when I really thought we were okay and it was a thing of history, it came back. We'd had a scan the day before, and the oncologist rang me, and then she said, his tumour's growing again. Sorry. Yeah, I remember really clearly, I managed to pick up my keys and my phone, and I walked out to my car, and I just stared at the steering wheel, and I didn't know what to do. Sam was home from work that day, and I knew I couldn't come home and see her. I wasn't ready to face her, and I didn't know who I could call. I couldn't ring either of my parents because they love him and they'd be shattered, and I couldn't ring any of my friends because they're all the same. So I drove out of the car park and I rang the Childhood Cancer Association. I spoke to Anna, one of our counsellors, and I drove around for 45 minutes. By the end of the phone call, she'd sort of talked me into a spot where I was okay to come home. And obviously, there's no magic wand, she couldn't make it better, but she just got me to a stage where I was okay to come home and tell Sam, and then ultimately we told Thomas. I'm probably a typical Aussie bloke. I thought I'd never need counselling, that wouldn't be my way. So I did the second time round, talked to the counsellors every week or two, and it was a massive difference. And that's really, I feel this gratitude. I quite often say to people, I could volunteer for the association for the rest of my life. I don't think I'll ever pay back that one phone call. So we told him, and then he had another surgery and another 52 weeks of chemotherapy. I think at week 50, as they were putting the needle into him to give him the chemo, it's a big needle, it's really quite nasty. When you were putting it in, he looked at me through some tears and said, "Gee, I can't wait for this to be over. Only 2 weeks to go." I said, "Yeah, you'll be okay." Turned around, went in the hallway, had a cry, and then came back. And that sort of takes us to now. There's no sign of growth. He had a scan in December. We have a scan every 6 months. I think to myself, he's 13, we should be okay. But also, last time I felt like that was when it came back. So every scan's awful. Every scan you feel physically sick for a week. People say it's a real roller coaster ride, isn't it, or whatever. And that's an interesting thing, because a roller coaster, you know it's over. 2 minutes of terror and it's over, and you kind of know it's going to be okay, really. But for this, there's no over. I genuinely think he'll be okay now. Sometimes I believe it. He's empathetic and incredibly loving. In the evening, I'll lie on the ground watching television, and he'll just roll over and snuggle right into me, and he'd lie there for hours if I rub his back. I wonder about whether this is just how he would have been. I don't know whether he would have been like that, or whether that's just because of this bond of taking him through all this battle. I don't know. But he's a happy, really loving, smart kid. He's a joy. I just want him to lead a good life, lead a happy life and a long one. So that's, I guess, what we all want for our kids, isn't it?